I wanted to tell you a couple of stories before I invite our speaker tonight, Dror, to the stage. The first thought that occurred to me was to sort of use a little bit of my own personal history and personal experiences and relationships, specifically the experience of family, to illustrate a central point. So I am probably someone you would consider a reasonably good father. Not so bad, but only an improving husband. And my wife knows this only too well. So I wanted to use this opportunity to thank my wife for forgiving all my sins. All my sins, past, present, and future. And it might sound like something funny and a throwaway line. No. Confession leads to too many complications. Also, being an atheist, I don't believe in seeing the priest to confess my sins. But I raise this particular point because all of us in this room know that family is impossible and marriage is impossible without an enormous capacity for forgiveness. And in that spirit, I'd like to congratulate my old friend Kyle Defayemi and his wife Bisi on their 30th wedding anniversary, which is what brought them to Cape Town. Forgiveness is central because I think it's linked to one thing. The health of societies. Beyond the health of the family, the health of the society also requires an infinite capacity for forgiveness. I think this is the magic of Nelson Mandela's understanding of the nature of human beings, that the capacity to move forward into a shared future is actually predicated on being able to forgive. I will take it a step further by adding that I think that there is something to be said for something that is extremely counterintuitive, which is that we always say that we need to remember. We need to remember in order not to repeat our mistakes. But I would add that we also almost concurrently have the capacity to also forget. Because if we cannot forget, there is no possibility of progress. So the question is, where is the right balance between remembering, which Milan Kundera describes as something so central to our being, but also willfully forgetting in certain circumstances in order to maintain our own mental health as well as the health of the community at large, so that a new future can be built and we don't have to start a war as happened in Bosnia because somebody bombed your mosque in 1634. So in this spirit, and for the lessons I have learned over the 30 years that I have inflicted myself on my wife, I now know that she has been able to cope because she probably does forget a few of my infractions. The second thing I wanted to touch upon briefly is that what I am learning as I approach age 60, my wife got there about 7 years before me, but I don't think I've disclosed your age in any way. Oh, okay, I apologize. I asked for forgiveness of future sins, did I not? I find that that it is in these sort of gatherings, when we make them happen, that the unexpected magic has the potential to occur. We have come here to discuss extraordinarily difficult subjects, powerful, complex things. Laurie Garrett was giving the most extraordinary presentation earlier today, this morning, integrating and linking for us everything about our environment and a lot of the public health challenges that we face. It was the first time I had seen it in its total complexity, even though I've been friends with Laurie Garrett even before my wife became my wife, which is to say for 31 years. I'm seeing this for the first time from Laurie Garrett because somehow when we created this thing as an experiment, you actually don't know whether it's really going to work. And the sort of magic that happens when you have a Neil Muyanga talking about how he makes music becomes a conversation, not about music, but about philosophy and about culture and about morality and intellect and history and making all these connections that we as human beings have, linking the evolution of this particular kind of music from Italy to France to Germany to Soweto to his father. This is the magic that happens when we give ourselves the chance to gather like this rather than to use Zoom to talk to one another. So I would like to thank again the people who made this happen. Yesterday, I had mentioned the Eindhoven family, who are very, very good family friends, who committed to this actually when it was just an embryonic idea about 3 years ago. And when I was just talking it to death, and they finally said, we are in, just stop talking about the thing. And of course, those who came later, like the CEO of Telkom, Sipho Maseko, who I didn't know from Adam. I had never met him in my life until about 4 months ago, when a friend suggested, why don't you speak to Sipho? He seems to be one of those sort of future invested individual who's trying to drive some kind of a change. So I called Sipho and I said, a few friends, mutual friends, said we should get together. And I wonder why. Perhaps we should. And he said, well, let's meet for breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning in Melrose Arch in Johannesburg, which the two of us did. And by the time the last cup of coffee was served with shaking hands and Sipho was in, and he's unable to be here because he has urgent corporate business in London, but some of his colleagues are here, and please express my full appreciation to Sipho Maseko. And of course, there is a whole army of people. I get to be the one that stands there and kind of, give my spiel about the act of forgiveness for sins past, present, and future. But the people who are actually doing the works, so many of them who are scattered here and elsewhere on this campus. And by our last day, I will devote a particular few minutes to thank them individually and to get them to rise. For tonight, I just say thank you. Shabonga, Inkosi, Baya Danki, and all the good things. Asante Sana, Eshe Pupot, na good. A few days ago, my wife arrived from New York on Saturday around noon, and we were happily ensconced in our redoubt in Banhoek. Banhoek is Afrikaans for scary corner. It is anything but. I imagine that in the old days when people were moving from Cape Town by horse-drawn wagon and trying to get to Franschhoek, that was where the bandits waylaid them, and the mountain lions attacked them, and elephants trampled them. Whatever it was that made them name it Banhoek, happily no longer exists. Instead, it is filled with a lot of good neighbors, some of them in this room tonight. Michael Jordan is sitting over there. Michael fled banking and became a winemaker, as well as a tech investor. You will be hearing from Michael at some point during the course of the week on a panel in which he will participate. But all of them have been good neighbors to us, and I have adopted them because apparently they also are from my same ancestral village of Stellenbosch. So I was saying that a couple of nights ago, after my wife had arrived, and our daughter then arrived, the high-spirited one that many of you would have run into over the course of the last couple of days, flew in from Los Angeles to help out with the festival, arrived about 9:30 p.m., got home about 11. I had just received a call from President Kagame's office canceling his appearance at this festival. He was supposed to deliver the provocations tonight. And they were full of apology. They said urgent business had occurred, and this is a particular risk for inviting presidents and so on to attend events. Until they actually show up, all bets are off. But they sounded genuinely mortified that he was unable to attend. And he also had an engagement at the World Economic Forum, which of course also was canceled. And the ambassador subsequently called to apologize and to say one and only was going to be holding on to their cash because they'd canceled their stay at the hotel. But when something like that happens, something else fills its space. And actually, I was wondering why I was so blind to this to start with, because I should actually have put Ami Dror in this slot, whether or not President Kagame was coming. Ami is a good friend of mine, a fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Initiative, Global Leadership Network. I think you will have seen a lot of Aspen fellows in this room, because when you sound the bugle, the first people to answer your call are always your fellows. So I thank all of you for being here and for making things appear to be so smooth, when in fact we are just busy patching from one thing to another, which is the nature of the beast. Ami is a native of Israel and a man of the world who has lived on at least 3 continents, the ones that I'm aware of. This is what is interesting about Ami Dror. As all Israelis must, Ami was drafted into the Israeli Defense Force to serve his 2 years, which became several years, and eventually became the head of security for Israeli prime ministers. And the first day on the job was supposed to be November 6, 1995. And the man he was supposed to be protecting, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, was assassinated 24 hours earlier, and so derailed the extraordinary promise of the moment to finally resolve this painful history between Israel and the Palestinians. This was something that, in that one dramatic moment of a single assassin changing the course of Israel, such as the same gunman who was standing on Sarajevo Bridge in 1914, altered the course of human history. This lone assassin altered the course of Israeli and Palestinian history by taking out a hard man who became a true believer in resolving the problem. And we have not recovered from that since. The connection to Ami Dror was Ami was supposed to start protecting him from November the 6th, but he was gone on November 5. Ami served this country, but is a deeply humane and large-hearted human being who constantly looks for ways of solving problems. Ami does not believe in just talking about things, and a very minor indication of this was there is one of our mentors at Aspen, one of the grandees, who worked for many years with my young friend Keith Berwick, who has graced our festival with his presence from Santa Barbara, is a man called Skip Battle. And there was a program to honor Skip Battle for his many years of service for the Aspen Global Leadership Network. In fact, there wasn't a program. There was AMI. AMI just said, let's send this man off in a way that shows our love and our appreciation for the many, many years he has contributed to the network. And AMI just gathered everybody together, and there emerged the Skip Battle Prize with a Nobel Prize type of pendant, and the programming, and the whole thing was done. This is a man who just does things. He is the same as Manoj Kumar, who we heard from this afternoon. And Ami decides he wants to educate all of the world's children in the ways of the new world that we are facing, which is that he believes that he has found the magic to actually teach every kid to code, and therefore arm them with the tools to flourish and to survive in the world that has now emerged. So I thought that we should hear from Ami Dror, who wants to make sure that every African kid can learn to code, can contribute to society, and also, coincidentally, make a living. And so we want to listen to this formula that Ami has in his creation of the organization called LeapLearner, which he did in Shanghai several years ago, and which is now teaching hundreds of thousands of Chinese kids. Those are the ones who pay him the money to code. This has taken off in China, and he was named as the leading entrepreneur in China just about a year ago. And Ami now thinks that that is not quite enough to just be giving this to those who can afford to pay. And his next mission now, even without any prodding from me, is to teach every African child how to code. And he says, I don't need anything from you. Just give me internet connection and a laptop, and every kid can learn to do this. And I will show you why. He will show us why tonight. I come with a healthy dose of skepticism, like my friend Francis Daniel, but I am also a convert because I believe in the possibility of human beings. So, Ami, I have talked too much because I'm a Nigerian, so forgive me. But come on to the stage and tell us about the children.
Thank you, sir. So what Dele didn't tell you is that the following morning, after Rabin was assassinated, I started working with, at the time, Prime Minister Shimon Peres, and later the President Peres, and we became very good friends. And well, I guess it was about 2 years ago, just before he passed away, I had a meeting with him, and I said, Mr. Peres, you know, you're like legendary. You're full of achievement. And he hushed me, and he said, Ami, listen, only people that have bigger dreams than achievement are alive. Those are people that have achievements, they are dead. And that might explain my concept of actually trying to solve problems. So, so the picture that you see on the screen is my most passionate possession. This is a computer, Atari, that my mother bought me when I was probably 10 years old. And maybe some of you know this device. And I'm coming from a kind of very modest family. Father is a Holocaust survivor, kind of had to rebuild himself. My mother is Israeli, that was born in Israel. And not very well educated, both of them, kind of primary school. But when my mother heard that there's something called a computer, she understood that computers will change the world. And even today, she has no idea what's a computer. But she heard that there's something like this, and she said, okay, you should try to use it. And with this simple computer, I started to learn software myself. I taught myself how to code. I learned my English by creating a software that checked my spelling with this computer in BASIC. And I used it for a while. I developed my video games. I loved it. And then Dele kind of told you the story. I went to the army, pilot training, experiments, Secret Service. And then I was bored. And all my colleagues are still, they retired from the Secret Service. After a couple of years, I said, I want to do something else. I became an Israeli diplomat. I was the Israeli vice consul in Dublin and later in France. And came back to Israel and said, I was 30 years old. And I said, Sol, I know you're giving a talk tomorrow. I'm giving you the prototype of the Israeli entrepreneur. Please use it. So I was 30 years old. 30 years old, and I said, okay, what's next? And my friends just opened a very big cinema in Tel Aviv. The cinema was empty in the morning. And they said, Ami, do you have any idea what we can do with that? I said, well, I want to use it for education. So we started to bring kids to the cinema, but we wanted to make it interesting. So we said, you know what? We'll bring 3D movies. Develop a simple system, like two guys developed a simple system, started showing 3D films, went fantastically well, and like every Israeli, a company of T people, we started to sell internationally. Turkey, Spain, blah, 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 ended up in Slovenia. I know it sounds like a joke, but it's a real story. Ended up in Slovenia, and a friend over there told me, let's use it for entertainment. And this became the prime 3D system. So any of you that ever watched a 3D movie like Avatar, there's a 50% chance that you actually saw it on my system. The company moved from 2 people to 1,000 people in less than 2 years. It was a huge success, stayed up, and then crashed on the way down. So, and again, concept of failures, moving forward. You don't stop. Next was a fund. And I decided, actually also because of the Aspen Institute, to start Israeli-Palestinian Fund. Makes a lot of sense to have Israelis and Palestinians funds together. Doesn't really work. But it worked. Raised money and start investing tens of millions of dollars in Israeli startups with a fund. And I have to say, I'm not a good investor. I'm so-so. And after a couple of years of doing it, I said, you know what? I want to find something that will really change the world. And I was starting to think what happened with me. What changed my life in the course of my life? And it was very obvious, this computer. Because it's in things that you would not imagine, like when I was doing planning in the Secret Service, the fact that I knew how to use computers more than anybody else gave me advantage. So I said, you know, I can actually teach kids how to code, and I know it as, and my kids were also young, and I said, okay, let's try with the Israeli system, because Israel is actually very advanced in teaching coding for kids. And my daughters at the time, they were 8 and 9, they liked it, but it was so boring. And eventually I said, you know what, I need to develop a system that will teach them how to build video games, because I know that they love playing video games. And I said, I will just teach them from the first day how to hack video games and how to develop video games, because I just wanted them to keep learning. I didn't want them to stop. And when I was working on it in order to start this company in Israel, a good friend of mine from China, one of my investors, she said, Ami, you have to do it in China. And I said, China? And she said, you really have to do it. And I said, why? And she said, well, you know, if you can make it work in China, you can make it work everywhere, A. B, it's the biggest market in the world, and we really need it. We really need this innovation education in China, and we believe that this can work. Flew over to China, been there for a week, got back to Israel, said to my wife, what about moving to China? And she said, I'm thinking about you, Dele. Okay, let's move to China. So we literally pack our kids, 3 kids, moved to China, landed in a small office with my co-founder, Aaron, which is Chinese. And he said, Ami, so what's the plan? I said, there's no plan. He said, so what you want us to do? And I said, let's start building it. But he said, what about research? And I said, no research, let's just building it. So we start building. We start building an amazing platform that allows every child to learn how to code. Beautiful, self-learning on iPads. Spend 6 months on this platform. So it's all for you, just that you know. Spend 6 months on this platform, showed it to the Chinese parents, and they said, no way. You want our kids to sit with iPads? That's games. That's not education. We want something real. So fast forward, we had to evolve in multiple ways, and eventually we found ourselves sitting in schools, and the kids loved it. They just loved the fact that they can develop their own video games. Schools started calling us, learning centers started calling us, and then we had the problem. The average Chinese parent said, our kids are too busy. They don't have time to spend going to a learning center or to school to learn because they need to learn the real things, like math. And I would say what coding is math, but nobody really understood what I mean. And we said, but there is technology. There is we can teach you remotely. We can teach you in something like a Zoom call or a Skype call, develop this platform, and then the company started to fly. So what you see on the screen, on the left side, you can see the way we teach kids. We teach thousands of kids like this how to learn all over China. Our teachers in Shanghai can teach students in the United States. They teach a little bit in Africa, and definitely we teach all the time in China. But this also evolved into other things, like teaching in classroom. And in this process, we had a problem. Because while we know how to teach, we need teachers. And guess what? There is no coding teachers in the world. So if you're really good in coding, you go and work for high-tech companies. Nobody wants to be a coding teacher. This profession does not exist. So you have in schools people that teach kind of information technology. Usually they will teach like Word or PowerPoint. I'm not talking Africa. I'm talking in the most advanced schools in the world. So we do things like this, but nobody will really know how to do it. So I had to start teaching hundreds of teachers just to comply with what I needed for China. And surprisingly, the good teachers were not developers. They were actually teachers. So when we took a developer and we're trying to turn the developer into a teacher, it didn't work very well. But when we took especially young teachers and trying to teach them how to teach coding, it worked extremely well. And we found ourselves starting to engage with teachers again and again and again, whether it is rural areas of China, which is, it's not sub-Saharan Africa, but it was sub-Saharan Africa recently, like districts and cities coming to us and saying, can you train us? And we do something very simple. We say, okay, we'll train your teachers exactly like we teach the kids remotely. We'll give them all the tools. We'll give them all the platforms, and they can start teaching the kids how to code. And now let me please make a stop and explain what is coding, because this is probably the hardest thing to people that are not developers to understand. When you think about coding, usually you think about this giant, this genius person sitting in a room writing code on like 2 computers and developing a program that will change the world. In reality, coding definitely doesn't work this way. It's a team effort of hundreds of people that are doing parts of a puzzle called software. Some of those people will be extremely smart and capable algorithm developers. Those will be like the best mathematicians that went to the best universities. Some people will just do basic testing. They will just play the video game, and they will say if the video game works or doesn't work. Some of the games that you're talking about, thousands and thousands of people are working on them. So there is a huge range in this space that we call coding. And different people need to do the different tasks. So I can train somebody to do a very advanced task, but they need to have some background, and they will make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. But even if you go to the lowest level of tasks that we have in the coding world, they actually make very decent salaries. So when we teach coding, we are not trying to say you need to be a JavaScript developer. Not at all. Especially with kids, we're saying to them that they need to understand computational thinking. Because no matter what they would want to do when they grow up, they will need to understand computational thinking. And this is happening now. This is not in the future. For example, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a chef, if you want to be a journalist, you need to know coding. And you say, why do I need to know coding if I want to be a lawyer? Very simple. There are artificial intelligence systems right now that know how to write contracts better than human. Then there are 2 lawyers in the room. One lawyer that actually understands artificial intelligence, know how to use the tools, know how to configure the tools. This lawyer will be a lawyer. The other lawyer that doesn't know how to do it eventually will be replaced by the machine. than you can think of. You need to choose if do you want to be the person that's only using the tool and then to be replaced by the machine, or do you want to be a person that actually can customize it and be part of the developing it? So every child needs to know how to code. And if I need to divide the world right now into people with access, it's actually very simple. There are the people that have access to computers and internet, and there is the people that do not have access to the computers and internet. If you have access to the computers and to internet, and you have basic motivation, if you have the soul, if you know how to read and write, nothing will stop you. All the information is there. All the knowledge is there. You can learn whatever you want. If you don't have it, you have no access to those people. And our job right now is to make sure that every child have this access, because this is critical. If you give them this access, they can do everything. Just for the simple anecdote, if I will have a child here sitting in South Africa clicking links, they will just see a page on the internet and they click links, they will make more money than selling wood for fire. Because people will pay for those clicks, not that I'm proposing it, but I'm just trying to explain that in the digital economy that is all over you right now, there is a lot of assets, there's a lot of way to earn a living, there is a huge need of people, and everybody can do this job, and I will explain you how we did it. So with governments, it's quite interesting because I think in the context of Africa, it's something that can work, huge parts of Africa, but it can work very well. It's actually very simple. Like Dallas said, if you give me a room with computers and internet connection, I will teach every person in this room, no matter how old they are. We start teaching in China at 6 years old. No matter how old they are, no matter what is their background in education, I can teach them a certain level of coding and make them employable. I prove it. And that's what we're doing right now in China and government. Actually, we're doing the same thing now. We're starting to do it also in Israel to a certain level. And the governments, the regional governments in China understand it. They understand that if they want to compete with Shanghai, which is extremely advanced, this is the only way to drive the competition. And it's working extremely well for us. How do we do it? So the students that I have in Shanghai or in central China or definitely from the West, they are paying a lot of money. They are paying per lesson. And so my company is a for-profit company. I make a lot of money from those people that want to learn how to code. But when I go to parts of China that people cannot pay for whatever reason, I'm working with companies. So anybody from Starbucks, and I will speak about Unity in a second, and Microsoft and Citrip, and Baidu, all those companies partner with us and say, okay, we will take part of this region. The pictures that you saw before, these are pictures with the CEO of Yum China, so that's Pizza Hut and KFC. And they are sponsoring the education of those kids. They are sponsoring the computers. Usually those are used computers from their offices. And they pay a minor amount of money just to train the teacher, which is pretty much the only cost. Unity and Microsoft are interesting. I'll just speak about Unity for a second. Again, just to give you an idea, what is the potential. Unity is a game. And how many of you know what is Unity? Raise your hand if you know what's Unity. Very few. Okay. So Unity is a game engine. 70% of the games that you have on your phones, Apple, Android, whatever, run on Unity. It's a 3D. The latest Lion King movie was developed on Unity. It's a 3D environment. Unity desperately need Unity developers. They simply not exist. They're begging for those developers. The lowest salary that you can make as a Unity developer, and this is not university. This is finishing a course about, let's say, between 150 to 200 hours. The lowest salary that you can get is $70,000 per year. This is basic. They don't know people that make less than that. 200 hours. You don't need to be a mathematician. A lot of the jobs that you do in Unity is managing assets. It's managing digital pictures and kind of moving them and monitoring their data. There is a huge need. In Israel, we import developers. Most of the development work that we're doing right now is the lowest level is done in Eastern Europe. Why can it not be done here? It should be done here. And so this is, for me, it's a huge opportunity in Africa. So now I'm going to make a very big shift to Sierra Leone, because I want to explain how we actually do it. So this is a school called Ponca. I explained to you guys where it is right now. So it's not even in Freetown. It's not far from the Freetown airport, an area called Longi. Extremely, extremely poor. Even in sub-Saharan standard, it doesn't really get worse than that. And a good friend of us from Aspen, Navin, opened a school there a couple of years ago. And when I got to the school was tiny, and I said, well, we have to teach the kids coding. She said, Hami, what are you talking about? We don't have electricity, we don't have running water, we don't have anything. And I said, well, we can actually do that. And so we brought a solar power system. We also brought a playground just for fun, because it was fun building it. And we brought laptops, and we started teaching the kids. Now, for me, what was extremely empowering was that at a certain time, I left 10 kids next to 10 laptops in a room, and I went out. And when I came back to this room, probably 30 minutes later, those kids were playing with the Windows setting, and they were learning how to operate the computers. There was no teacher in the room. There was like nobody. They were just playing. And I said to myself, this is like, they were at the sixth grade at the time. I said, this is like incredible. Like those kids 30 minutes ago didn't know what's a mouse. They didn't know even what is that. They never saw a screen in their life. And they can do it so fast. So we started to teach in Ponca, and we've been teaching there for a year. And the learning pace was just incredible. Like what you would expect the kids to be like slow and adaptive, because you were saying you would assume that they're coming from a very poor background. That's actually their advantage. What they have, and we don't have in many places in the West, is passion to learn. Passion is so powerful. And when somebody understands that that this can change their life, you should see their motivation. It was incredible for me to see it, and of course we keep teaching them and it's growing. And then I said to myself, well, can this work also with young adults? And I said to Andrew, which is my friend from Sierra Leone, I said, listen, I want to hire 10 people here that will do digital skills for me. Like, for LeapLearner. I said, I'm just going to hire them, and because I have computers and internet, we'll teach them how to use it. The following day, there were about 40 people waiting in line, and each one of them said, yes, I want to work. I went to some level of education, higher education, sometimes university. About half of them said that they're willing to work for free as long as they can work with computers and internet. And I said, wow, people are willing to work even for free just because I brought a computer? I was shocked. And that led me to create a startup in Sierra Leone. And the startup is called Ponca, like the village. And we provide artificial intelligence services. And I will give you some examples of what we do there. So you all heard about artificial intelligence, right? It's a very fancy name for something that a lot of people are talking about. But in reality, what does it mean? We need to teach computers how to think. How do you teach a computer how to think? You create some form of a algorithm, and this is almost always open source. Because if I develop something in Facebook, I want the developers from Google to know it because they will help me to make it better. So there's no IP on the algorithms right now because everybody understands that open source is the way to go. But what's the differentiating factor between Google and Facebook? It's very simple. It's data set. How does it work? If I will feed a computer with, let's say, with 500 pictures of a road, and in those 500 pictures I will mark the trees and the road, the computer will understand that 60%. If I will feed the computer with 10,000, it will be like 90%. If I will feed the computer with 1 million, it will be like 96%. If I'll feed the computer with 100 million, it will get to the levels that China right now have with facial recognition, which is almost 100%. So every company in the world that is doing artificial intelligence for anything you think of, they need to create massive data sets. It means that somebody needs to take, you see the picture of the woman, and you see the dots on the elbows and on the knees, etc. Somebody needs to sit and mark those dots. So we give them 1 million pictures, and we say, mark those pictures. And guess what? This is coding. It's the simplest form of coding. But the people that do that they get about $250 to $300 a month in Sierra Leone. That's huge salary for people that are willing to work for free. And it's everything. It's from the remote controls to the faces. I just want to give you some examples. To satellite images. In the picture of the mouse that you see, this is surveillance camera that want to know if there's mouses in the property. Those are all real companies that we're doing the services. The pigs, they want to understand if the pigs were fed by the color of their ears. It's endless. So we, again, this is from satellite. Somebody had to mark every car that you see here. Now, when Manoj spoke today, he spoke about the way agriculture works, right? And the way I see it, there is something that you do now that you really need to work with the farmers, etc. But when you look at their kids, you have to understand that when they will grow up, there will be small drones doing the cherry picking. Because those drones will fly over the crop, they will see the right color in the right time, they will pick it and they will put it in the crop. And there's no way to stop it. It's happening. So when you look at kids, it's essential that those kids will know how to code to a certain level. And I don't care what is this level, but they really need to know it. Because this is the only way they will be able to do it. And here comes the biggest opportunity for Africa. The need is insane. China is already too expensive. You know, I have many developers in China. It's too expensive. If you look at India, Philippines, they solve part of the problem, but not to every task. And the need, again, is endless. So when you take kids right now, and you take them at 13, 14 years old, assuming that you gave them the food, you gave them the learning of numbers, etc. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying just beyond that, you can make them employable. Put a child at 13, give them training of 150 hours, they can make a living now. You don't need airports anymore. You don't need harbors. You don't need railroads. You don't need roads. They just need access to computer and internet, and they can work from Ponca in Sierra Leone for Warby Parker in New York. I don't know how many of you know Warby Parker. It's like the leading glasses company. The founder is one of our fellows. When you buy glasses from Warby Parker right now in New York, the order goes to Ponca in Sierra Leone. Somebody measured the distance between the pupils, and then they make the glasses in the United States. Some of those companies that you see there, they're unicorns. There are over, two of them, like over billion-dollar companies. It's here now. It's really not going anywhere. I want to give you like some numbers just for fun. Artificial intelligence industry, this is all numbers for 2020, $65 billion industry. E-learning, $265 billion industry. This ability to have a teacher right now here teaching children in Ponca or anywhere else in the world like we're doing right now. And when you talk about 5G, you know right now 4G is moving into many cities in Europe, but 5G is coming. When you're talking about 5G speeds, it's literally like you are in the same place. There is no latency anymore. The developer that is working on 5G in Ponca will be working almost seamlessly to the one working in Tel Aviv. Now, the last thing that I want to explain, this is, by the way, the Ponca team right now. We have 35 people. We'll have 100 people by the end of this year. Oh, and another interesting factory. We just raised almost $1 million VC for a startup in Sierra Leone. You know, just think how crazy it is that we can do it because people understand the need. The need is huge. We have right now more customers that we can supply. Our biggest challenge right now is to train the people in Sierra Leone to do it. There is no reason why we'll not have one office in Sierra Leone and one in Nigeria. There's like no reason whatsoever. It's all doable, and it's doable now. You know, when you look at the most critical part of it, we don't really have time. This is really the point. When I'm talking about coding for every child, and people are telling, yeah, but you know, we don't have food. I'm saying, yes, we need to solve the food problem. Right, that's fine. Without food, the brain doesn't develop, it doesn't work. And we need to teach them. We need real teachers to teach basic math, etc. Yes, basic English, etc. If you look at the dropout age in schools in Africa, and I'm talking in the example of Sierra Leone, but I've seen in other African countries, it's usually around the 5th grade, the 6th grade. Because then the families want them to go to work. They want them to be a provider for the family. They don't want them to stay in school. If they understand that those kids can make more money in digital skills, they will change the trajectory. Africa must leapfrog right now. Must. There is no other option. And when people are telling you, oh, you know, it's so complicated, I just don't buy it. Computers used to be expensive. They are not. They are damn cheap. Actually, most companies, after 3 years, don't know what to do with their computers. They will just give it to you for free. It's there. Internet, in some places, is more expensive, but you can push it. Definitely, as policymakers, you can reduce the price of the internet, because this is the enabler. This is the oxygen to the thing. And I really want to encourage you to do it, not to think about it as a theoretical example, but something is practical. Because if I can do it in Sierra Leone, there is no reason why we cannot do it in any other place in Africa now, not tomorrow. And guess what? I'm doing it. When I moved to China 3 years ago, and people, people said, like, coding? Why coding? Blah, blah, blah. We have almost 500,000 students in China right now. Those are 500,000. And when I say coding, we're not teaching them Scratch. We're not teaching them like the tiniest thing. We teach them real development, Python, and extremely advanced things. We have to do it in Africa now. Yes, I see you want to ask a question, Adele. I'm sure we'll do the question. So that's pretty much it. And yes, boss. That's great.
Thank you.
Sit there. There's a gentleman there that wants to ask a question for the last 10 minutes.
We'll get to him. We'll get to coding, but I want people to know you a little bit more.
Okay.
Before we get to coding, coding can wait. You can solve that in no time. Tell us about your mother.
My mother? Well, my mother is a fierce believer in education. And she always thought that she should teach us the things she doesn't understand. So I think that was her biggest skill. Like if she would say, oh, I don't really understand, this is what you should know. And she did it actually all my life.
So did you ever have the Atari conversation with her? What impelled her to buy you an Atari?
She heard. Like there was a news article. She was like reading the news. And they spoke about computers like we speak right now about artificial intelligence. It was a very abstract thing. But she didn't have a lot of education, right? No, primary school. Yeah. Like she didn't know what it is. Even today, she doesn't understand what it is. And when she saw me writing, by the way, my biggest convincing her to buy me a computer was hard. Like I initially coded by writing code on a piece of paper. And I said, like, I need a computer, I need a computer, I need a computer. She had to take a big loan in order to buy me a computer. So I was also pushing, but she never thought that I'm crazy or anything. And she always said, I just go for it.
Okay. Thank you. I know you try to explain what coding is, but for guys like me, take another stab at it.
Okay. So, actually, I'll ask you a question. Do you know what is the most common coding language in the world?
Basic.
Which?
Basic.
Basic? Most common language? Java? Try. I'll give you a secret. Many of you use it.
Python?
No. Excel. Do you ever use Excel?
Yes.
In Excel, when you say, if something happened in this cell, you should do it here and then move it and add it, etc., a series of commands, that's coding. Now,
so we're already coding.
Yeah, we're already coding. But unfortunately, everybody in this room uses maybe 0.01% of the capacity of Excel, which means that those people that know Excel a little bit better will do their work much faster. So this is like an example. Even if you're creating a PowerPoint, advanced one, it's a form of coding. But this is kind of the more visual parts of coding. When you talk about developers that are writing code in Python, right now they will write it in the form of language. They will write it as a text. But I will be the first one to say that those kids that we're teaching Python right now will never use Python in the future because it will be replaced by something much better. So the point is not to teach them a certain language that you don't know, but to teach them computational thinking, to teach them how do you give instructions to technology, how do you get the feedback from the technology, and based on that, to working. So if you look again at general people right now, there will be the people that are terrified of the technology, and people will say, you know, I'm just going to use it. And there are people that will try to do more than that. And there will be some people that really want to reinvent it. Not everybody needs to reinvent it, but you need, the deeper you go in the knowledge, the more employable you are in the future. So for example, I just give you like day-to-day jobs right now. You know, your phone just broke down. You don't know what happened to him. Maybe there's a lady that sits in a small shop here not far, and she's working on computers, and she learned by the internet how to fix your phone, and you're going to pay her, like, I don't know, $15 to fix your phone. She's not a developer. She's not a coding. She knows one level more than you, and there's somebody who knows another level, and another level, and another level, and the more deep you are, and this is why it has to start in such an early age. Another thing that we saw in China, and again, it's known all over the world, and Amir spoke about the silver bullet about girls' education, is that girls, if they start to code in an early age, they just stay in it. And while this is why it was so important with my daughters, that I wanted when they were 8 years old, I want them to know code, it's becoming more like uncool as you grow up historically. But of course, you can change it by starting early. And I'm actually just the way, even in my company, I have almost 70% women versus men as a principal because of it.
Okay, thank you. So when you say you could pretty much teach any kid on our continent to learn to code, the first question that will come to people's mind will be, but most of these countries, if they have power at all, it's intermittent, it's unreliable. That's the number one obstacle. Number two obstacle is there are still large swathes that have no internet at all. And of course, then you get to the question of having laptops and so on. How did you solve these problems in Ponca? And how will that approach to solving the problem in a specific place scale to other places? Okay. So first, I always say Kara Namuda because that's the end of the rail line in Nigeria. It's as remote as it gets, right, on the edge of the Sahel. So how do you teach the kid in Kara Namuda to code? So with those problems, electricity, you know, it's definitely solvable. The amount of electricity that we need for computers is minor, and the stability is not an issue. That's the way I'm using it in Ponca, even when we give service, you know, you have backups, etc. So I don't think electricity is an issue anymore. Internet is a big issue. Internet, like in Ponca, initially I had to build a small tower from wood, and I had like a mobile phone at the top, and it was connected to the 4G and feeding up, so it was really a big challenge, but definitely there is an improvement. First time I came to Sierra Leone, there was no 4G. Now there is 4G. 4G allows you to do it, and I think you see it everywhere. If you don't have access to internet, I cannot teach you. And this is why I truly believe that this should be, you know, from the telecom companies to government, if there is something, I would make sure, like it's like access to water for me. If you don't provide people with access to the internet in this era of human history, you are making sure that forever they will be back. Now, right now, maybe we cannot do it there, but I believe that while if we work together also in infrastructure issue, we can get there closer. Particularly with telcos who have the capacity. Definitely. To do telcos, if there is a 4G signal right now, nothing stops you anymore, and when we get to 5G, it will be. But even without 5G, you don't really need it for that. You can. So yeah. So right now, not every child in Africa. By the way, not every child in China as well, and so it's nothing to do with sub-Saharan Africa, but we're getting there. Yeah. And when we get there, every child should have the opportunity. By the way, the biggest barrier to teach kids how to code in China, in Israel, and also here is the parents. The parents and the adults don't understand what is coding. They don't understand why it is important, and they're actually stopping it. So just from China,
we need to spend so much energy to explain to the parents why it's important to their kids. The kids, they don't want to leave it. We 80% of our students stay with us forever, or for like the last couple of years. And this goes everywhere because, sadly, the adults don't understand. They grew up in a different environment. School was different. Everything you do in school was different than those kids.
Have you considered making your mother an ambassador for LeapLearner?
Well, I wrote a book about Jewish and Chinese education, and she's the main part of my presentation. But it's funny. She doesn't know, but she is a big part of it.
Let's talk about China briefly, and then I'll open this up to everyone. I'm sure everybody would like to ask you some questions. So. The moment you and I started talking about LeapLearner, and my ears just pricked, and I was like, we have to do this in Africa. And, I have some friends, some good close friends in Nigeria who are in a position to actually make this kind of thing work. So I just said to you, the governor of Kaduna State is a good friend of mine, and he's interested in this kind of thing. Let's go just do it in Kaduna and get everybody else to be envious, and then they will all demand it, right? And then you said, in fact, there is only one African on your staff in China.
Right.
And he's from?
Nigeria.
And from specifically?
From the state.
From Kaduna.
And he's right now there teaching coding completely by accident. He went to visit his family, but that's completely by incident. I didn't plan it, of course.
So I think the governor of Kaduna State, you have no choice but to start doing some work with
I sent him our picture together. He was very excited, by the
way. So when we lived in China in the mid to late 90s, this was not your father's Oldsmobile. Children were still shitting in the streets in Beijing in 1997. This is true. Ask my wife. She was there. Can
we get your wife actually to talk? I really want to hear your part of the story.
And so that China is different from this China. Totally. I remember, and Michael might be interested in this particular story, I was trying to write a long story about all the villages and towns that were going to be wiped out by the building of the Three Gorges Dam. So I rented a boat from where the locks were going to be closed and stayed on the boat for 4 days, 400 miles to Chongqing, and stopped at these villages along the way. So as we got to this particular village, and the porters came and carried our bags, as we were getting to street level from the Yangtze River, there were about 3,000 people, and they saw me, and they were moving back as one. There is a black man in this village.
Black devil.
And finally, one of them summoned the courage and moved forward and gave me his hand, and he said, "Do you know Michael Jordan?" I said, "Of course. Michael Jordan and I were in high school together." So he turns around to the crowd. He knows Michael Jordan. So everybody comes shaking hands, and the beers came out miraculously and so on. So I do now finally know a Michael Jordan. So this is a different China then.
China.
And the China that you are now operating in, and have managed to get 500,000 students whose parents are paying you for this skill. How do we begin to get that kind of scale? And I know you had talked about there is a not-for-profit arm that you have now created, that it is not everywhere where people will be able to pay LeapLearner for this, but you don't want that to stop you. Can you explain that part of it?
Yeah, so there are two solutions, first of all. So the first one is actually there is no cost. Like I can tell you, in your state, it will not cost you anything. So it's not even an issue. Think about it. I only need to remotely train teachers. My cost on something like this is minor. This is regardless of my nonprofit arm. What I did with my nonprofit is, remember the first product that I developed? The one that the Chinese parents said that no way? It's actually a super sophisticated system to learn Python. So we turn it into a nonprofit called ico.org, and we run it's an international coding Olympics, and every child have access to the system, and they can just register with their school. It doesn't cost anything. It will never cost anything, and it's a gamification of learning. In the last competition that we had a few months ago, there were a lot of different kids from mainly Ethiopia and Kenya, but there was a lot of kids from Africa that participated in it. But again, it goes to the same thing. Coding is really not an issue of money. The 5,000 kids that you're talking about, they're paying extremely...
500,000.
No, the 5,000, there is a group of 5,000 that pay a lot of money, like private tutors, etc. The 500, it covers multiple things, from schools that are paying like literally less than $1 a year for the students. And so we're really touching a big range. This is not the issue. Like, I guarantee that this is not a problem that will prevent it. And I can do it with my non-profit arm or for-profit arm, but this should not prevent the children from...
Well, let's do it, man.
Let's do it. It's
okay.
Like, I don't think it should stop you.
All right. So I know a lot of people have questions for you. So we'll go Jimmy, Laurie, and I have my back to this area. I'll pay some attention. So, Jimmy.
My name is Jimmy Lawal from Kaduna State. I'm Senior Advisor and Counselor to the Governor. Let me thank you, Amy, for what you've said. And I didn't know you've had a conversation, but I wanted to let you know that we do have an ICT hub in Kaduna, equipped with about 250 laptops, access to the internet. Can we sign an agreement this evening? Thank you.
Laurie.
Yes.
This is great, and I hope you'll come to Brooklyn really soon and go into the Brooklyn School District. But I do have a skeptic question.
Sure.
Many of us have been victims of hackers. Some of us have lost money and all kinds of things because of hackers. You're now training a huge number of hackers. Do you have some kind of, social values, moral messaging that you give these kids, or are you just going to let them all loose to rip off all of our bank accounts?
Let me say this. If the kids from Ponca will become hackers, we are all set. That's like, that means that we're turning Africa to the best place on earth. Because, we call them like black hats and white hats. Those are the hackers that are helping or not helping. In Israel, those kids that grow to become hackers, they are the most strategic asset of our country. And of course, we do talk about morals and teamwork and global citizenship, and we send kids from different countries. But in reality, knowing all the powers of the internet and all the powers of computers actually ensures that you're always ahead of everybody else. So I really, initially when I explain to parents what we do, I tell them we teach your kids how to hack computers. And I'm very proud of it.
Okay. So I'll get to you.
So I've actually been told to do this. So I'm Roger from South Africa, and we've got Wi-Fi, we've got 25,000 schools. So we'd like to outbid Kaduna State. Can we sign a contract tonight for South Africa?
I think I should call Habib.
Yes, you should.
And just send him here.
So we'll do country and then we'll come to you. Okay.
So I'm a journalist, I'm not a governor. And unfortunately, I can't ask you to sign a contract. But because I know you're coming to Kaduna, can I ask you to please extend your trip to Zamfara State? Exactly
you have
where...
a room of comfort.
Yes, this is exactly where Garanamoda is, actually. It's part of Zamfara. But, we don't have internet in Garanamoda, but we do have in the state capital, Gusau. This is the epicenter of banditry and the rustling, which is sort of come under control now, but part of the problem is actually economic. And it will help us greatly if some of our schools can actually get some of these skills, because some of these children can then, not look to the bandits as their future. I have already spoken to the governor of Kaduna State, and he has promised that he will speak to the governor of my state, and between the two of us, we're pretty convinced that we can actually get him to also provide a room with laptops and internet. So think about Zamfara as well, please, yeah? Thank you.
Viva Zamfara. Let's talk to the Kenyans, and then I'll come back to the Nigerians. Yusuf.
Hi. Thank you for the interesting discussion, presentation. And I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a member of parliament in a low-income neighborhood where we have a lot of young people who've been taken in by radical organizations. I've set up a digital center where we train quite a number of young people. So please come to Nairobi and see us and support our project. Thank you so much.
Even the Costa Ricans are in on the act. Okay.
Actually, let me tell you something very interesting.
Okay.
That's actually, it's pumped something very interesting. The only country I'm actually not going after, and I find it very hard to work in, you'll be surprised, but it's actually the United States. I think that especially this passion that I see from you, this is exactly the opportunity. In the United States, there are organizations like Code.org and Khan Academy have the most amazing curriculum for coding, etc. And we have so many wonderful people in Aspen that run schools, etc. And because of bureaucracy, and because of unions, and because of many other problems, they can actually not put proper coding in Brooklyn. And this is the opportunity for all of you guys. And you really need to understand that it's an opportunity.
Thank you. All right, I'll go to you. Diko. Oh, okay. Well, you are not the moderator. I just said.
You like it, huh?
I'm a tin pot dictator. Tendencies.
It doesn't work. Okay. No. Okay. My name is Ibrahim Diko. I run a broadband company in Nigeria, which is delivering internet to as many people as I recently got a license from the regulator, right, to build 10,000 kilometers of fiber in northwest Nigeria. Okay? That's 40 million people, right? We're building 10,000 kilometers of fiber over the next 4 years, right? We're going to cover Kaduna, Zamfara, right? Kano, right? Kano has the largest number of out-of-school children in the north, right? Our key aim is to take this fiber, particularly to schools around in this region. Because how can we scale this and institutionalize it across this area? That's, for me, what I'd like to sit down and have a chat with you. Right? How can we take this and really scale it, right, all along this wide area and meet these people?
Thank you very much.
I actually want to add something here, which is actually nothing to do with coding. When you have Fiverr, you can do a model that you can have access to teachers from all around the world in real time. And this opens another window of education that's really beyond my domain of having a professor somewhere in the United States or in London teaching 100 or 1,000 classes in the same time because you have the ability of Fiverr. So this is already beyond. This is like e-learning on steroids. So I think this is, you can do much more than what I have to offer right now, but we'll talk about it.
Yes.
I'm Bongiwe. I'm South African. I do want to believe that I am not the only fool in the room, so I'm going to ask this question and be the naive one, but I do want you to explain a few things very slowly.
I'll try.
So you said that parents were the obstacle often. And I think it's because as parents, we don't fully understand what is the real value of coding for our children. I'm a mother of 2 teenagers, and you are teaching 6-year-olds. I have teenagers who haven't done coding. One has, but the other hasn't. So I'm asking myself questions about, are they losing out? Am I making them miss out on something that is truly valuable for their future? What does it mean if they miss out on this opportunity right now? You know, why should they have this coding? Is it another language that if they don't have, in the same way that in South Africa, if you can't speak English fluently and eloquently, then you can be excluded? Is this what this is all about? So if you can just take us through the steps of the value of learning this and what it means for the future, I'll really appreciate it.
Okay, it's a good question. Thank you. I gave a TED talk, and I called it Robotish, which is the language of robots, which is the language of the future. And you're spot on. Coding is a language. It's a language of computational thinking. But unlike other languages, unlike English that doesn't change very often, coding is a language that changes extremely fast. So whatever you learn today will be almost irrelevant tomorrow. But the principles of the language, the way you connect the dots in the language is the same. So at 16 years old, of course, it's not too late. By the way, I don't recommend starting teaching your kids at 6 years old. This is a very Chinese thing. But at 9 or 10, for sure. And in Israel, by the way, we start teach kids at around 9 years old at schools. So it's a language. The earlier you start, the better. But when you think about it, it's combining many things. So first of all, it's math. Coding is math. It's a way to give mathematical instructions to a machine. It's logic. If this happens, do this. If this doesn't happen, do that. So it's really a combination of logics and math. This is the core. But you tap into it art. It's music. It's visuals, it's computer recognition, it's image recognition. So there is a very strong artistic element to it. And in reality, the pure technical element is actually declining versus the artistic one, the creative one, it's more of need for humans. So it really combines everything. Now, the most powerful thing about writing a code is that you have a feedback loop. I write something, I run it, there is a bug, there is a failure. There's always a bug. I say, okay, what's the bug? I need to find the bug, I need to fix it. Run it again, there is another bug. So I'm learning to fail, and I'm learning to fail and to react and fail and to react and fail to react. And then there is achievement of creation. For me, in my computer, I remember as a child, I wanted to play video games. And of course, I could not buy video games. It was unheard of. So I developed video games. I still remember my first video games. It was like a balloon falling down in a tunnel, and I had to make sure it doesn't touch the walls of the tunnel. So there is something about coding which allows you relatively fast to develop truly functional things that you can actually use. And we have students developing HR systems from their schools and apps and stuff like this. And we have kids just developing video games because that's what they like. But as long as they're tapping into this language, they're fine. If you look at the example of my daughters, I taught them how to code when they were young, and then after a while, both of them said, we don't like it. And they stopped. They didn't touch it for a couple of years. But they were excellent in math. They were like, and they didn't even understand why they are so good in math. And now, after a couple of years, both of them this year came back to me and say, we want to learn coding because they understand it's actually cool, that it's practical. They understand that they touch it with different disciplines. Another thing in this context, which is important to say, is the connection between coding and robotics. Robotics tends to be a little bit more popular to a certain level because adults understand it. It's a little bit of a Lego. When I need to build something with my daughter, and I don't know anything about coding, I can connect the different pieces and parts. And so this is really the concept of robotics. And then the software parts, which is relatively abstract, I will not touch it. The hardest, we're talking really about the abstract thing, about the language. And as many of you know, when you need to go and learn a language, you really start from a very basic level, and it's very, very difficult. So starting in coding, just the first few steps are terrifying, but not for kids, mainly for adults. Then you go into a level which the language is very visual. You move things on the screen. The level of math is actually very simple, and every kid can get it very fast. And then it becomes very mathematical. Things like functions and series, etc., are jumping into the game, and you really need to upscale your game in math in order to be able to code. So it's a practical language of math and logics tied into creativity, tied into insane amount of teamwork. Because if you look at an example of a car manufacturing, right? A software is like a car. There are a few people that will make the engine and make sure the engine is like using the optimal settings. But there are people over there that will work on the plastics and on the design and on the cushions and make sure the user interface, etc. You need massive, massive teams. And this is something that you don't start in the early stages of coding, but you need to speak the language. So if two developers that never work in the same environment meet, they very fast will know how to talk the language. So personally, by the way, I learned coding. I never worked a single day in my life actually writing code. But when people that are coders are talking to me, I can understand what they're talking about. And this is why it's a language. And 16 years old, for sure, they need to learn coding.
So I'm going to leave you with one challenge.
Sure.
If you undertake to teach John Carling how to code, then I have more confidence that this is going to succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, Ami Dear.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.